issue today on the future of housing. So let's get right to it. Thank you again.
Thank you, Carolyn. I am so excited to be here with you this afternoon, and thank everybody for tuning in. It is a pleasure to be here and to speak about the future of housing finance. My name is Calvin Cooper, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Row. And there are two types of people in this world. There are renters and there are owners. And I myself am a renter. And I made the mistake of calculating how much rent I spent in the past 10 years. It is astronomical. The average young person is going to spend over $200,000 in lifetime rent, much more than previous generations. And the secret is high rent isn't just a coastal problem. To be rent burdened means to spend over 30% of your income in rent. And the percentage of renter households that are rent burdened in Columbus is about the percentage of renters that are house burdened in San Francisco. This is a problem everywhere there is opportunity, domestically and globally. So homeownership is getting further out of reach for everyone. And this is being exacerbated by rising home prices that are increasing in spite of the pandemic. So millennials have no net real estate net worth. In fact, we don't own much at all. I remember owning music, buying CDs, opening up the album and having that joy of ownership. But now I can have all the music in the world at my fingertips with things like Spotify. We don't own our first home, let alone a vacation home, but I've been to many vacation homes through sites like Airbnb. And more renters live closer to work and closer to where they hang out. And so they're not buying cars. They're using things like Uber to get around. And so home ownership is next. But the problem with that is that a home is more than a place to keep your stuff and lay your head. A home is also a place to accumulate value. And a greater share of millennials no longer believe that a place to invest is in our home. 10% of us plan to always rent and do not anticipate buying a home. And the number of renter households that earn over $100,000 in annual income has doubled over the past several years. And so the difference between renting and home owning and the choices there is not just a matter of access or opportunity. It is also a matter of preference. We're going from a binary choice that doesn't leave us much of an option at all to having many options along the path to home ownership. What that looks like is that instead of saving up for a down payment for 15 years, there are emerging models like rent to own and shared equity. It allows you to move into your dream home now, and a portion of your rent goes towards the down payment when you're ready to buy. And when it comes to renting, you no longer have to throw away all of your money on rent without a return. With rentership, every renter is a stakeholder. You get a fixed cash annual return, and you're able to participate in the property value as it increases. And we're doing this at Gravity in Columbus, Ohio. This is a new development, and every renter at this property is a stakeholder. All you have to do is download the app and claim your stake. You can buy more and set aside money every month, because what is home ownership anyway but a way to automatically save for your future? Now you can do that with rent, and you can capture meaningful value over time, thousands of dollars. This is the new community development model. We're going from live, work, play to live, work, play, and own. And so why does this matter to people who aren't renters? Well, for property owners, if you're familiar with how innovation is adopted in the market, there are innovators that move first, that seek to differentiate themselves with new products. And in our market, there are property owners in every major city that see themselves as innovators, that view real estate as their contribution to community, and they're seeking to differentiate. They're competing with people across the street. They're in an amenities arms race. And so instead of spending more and more money online seeking to attract renters, they can pay renters more directly to get them to live in their building. They can engage renters with this amenity monthly through the mobile app. This is a means to retain tenants and to connect them to the property, because with a stakeholder mindset, renters might take better care of the property. This is also a way to inspire the broader community when communities are seeking solutions. Many people across the country are upset about gentrification, and the solution to our housing crisis is not to stop new development. Real estate development is good. We need new real estate development at all price points. Luxury, we need affordable housing, and we need workforce housing. But the problem is that currently the incentive structure isn't aligned in a way that allows everybody who lives in the community to have a financial stake in the value created in that community. So this is a free market solution to that problem, especially now as wealth is transferring from Main Street to Wall Street. After the last recession, there was a $60 billion wealth transfer from Main Street to Wall Street as investors bought up houses all across the country. And this time, we're going to ensure that every American has an opportunity to participate in the market comeback, because the market isn't working for all families. A quarter of American households cannot afford a $400 emergency, but we are changing that. Every rover who participates has more saved than the average American, and many are starting to accumulate significant value. But this is more than an economic issue. Homeowners are more likely to volunteer. They're more likely to participate in our democracy and vote. And as ownership rates in a community increase, violent and property crime rates decrease. That's because ownership bestows more than financial benefit. It's about citizenship and social responsibility. And this is a very old idea. Our founding fathers wrote about this extensively. John Adams, our second US president, wrote that the only possible way to preserve the balance of power on the side of equal liberty and public virtue is to make land ownership accessible to everybody, to divide it into small quantities so that everybody could possess landed estates. And so this is a 250-year-old idea in the making. And finally, we have the tools and the means and the technology to turn every renter into an owner. And so at this time, we'll take audience questions. It looks like somebody asked, how has Rove's business changed during the pandemic? That is an excellent question. When the market crashed in March, we asked ourselves, like many of you, man, what is the greatest thing we can do to contribute to society at this time? And so we all, in our homes, we've got a amazing 14-person team, mostly software engineers. We asked ourselves, okay, why don't we just launch Rentership now? What if on the other side of this shutdown, we had a beacon of hope and light for the world? And so the pandemic caused us to really accelerate our timelines and get this out there, especially since we understand that, as Carolyn mentioned, many of the timelines that people have been projecting about wealth transfer and all the problems in society would accelerate. And so we wanted to ensure that more people could participate in the market comeback. We've got another question. Where is Rove planning to expand to next? Well, I've been so inspired. Many people from all across the country and some from other countries have reached out to us. Our strategy right now is really value over volume. And so we're in talks with several people in many markets. And so we'll be launching Rove in other cities here soon. Somebody asked, who is our target customer? So our vision is that every renter will be an owner. At this time, we're targeting properties that are multifamily. There may be 50 or more units in a building, and that really allows us to scale and automate the tools needed to administer this. But in the future, we'll have products out there to serve renters living in housing, like even single family rental housing. We have another audience questions. How do you ensure that homes will attain their value as the market changes? That is an excellent question. The great part about launching this product in the multifamily real estate market is that there's a lot that goes into underwriting projects. Most of these projects have senior lenders who've underwritten these projects. And so there's a lot that goes into ensuring stability of value. But in addition to that, the deals that we do with property owners have what's called a 1x preference, meaning that we can protect consumers even if the price of the property decreases over time. Somebody is asking, how does Rove choose communities to expand to? That is a hard one. There are people everywhere in the world that need this product. And so, like I said, value over volume. We're going to choose to work with property owners that have incredible track records and brand, that have a long history of really providing great customer service to their residents. And so those are going to be our first partners. And then beyond that, we're gonna do some R&D and see what we do next. Let's see. Somebody has asked, what is the biggest challenge Rove has faced as a startup in this space? The biggest challenge we've faced is time, moving quickly to meet demand. We launched this product only a couple months ago, and people from all around the world have reached out. So we're working nights and weekends to bring this to everybody across the world. And so prioritization of our time and making tough decisions about how we execute is really tough. Somebody asked, how many employees do we have? I'm so excited. Four of us co-founded the company. Scott Sumi, who's our CTO, he was at IBM before this. He worked with a mutual friend, Jonathan Nutt, who's our head of product. And then Jonathan Slimp, who leads our marketing. The four of us co-founded this company, and we were so fortunate to be able to attract several other people to join us, 10 other amazing professionals. And we're pretty excited about this. If you have a chance to download the app and live in a community that offers Rove, you'll feel the love and the light and the passion that everybody on our team throws into the product. Somebody asked, do people have a fee in their property as they save, a fee interest? So our platform, we don't charge fees to download the app. But as you buy into your rentership pool, your stake into the property, you could set up what are automatic payments. And when you do that, there are no fees involved in purchasing a stake in your building. Last question, how have renters responded to rentership? Amazing. It's so crazy. When we launched this product, within days, we had a dozen people buy a stake in the building. And in the past several weeks, over 50 renters in our first building claimed a stake. Many of them are setting up recurring buys to set aside money every month. So I'm so inspired and excited to turn renters into owners, and we're just getting started. With that, I think that's our time, and I appreciate it. I'm so excited. If you want to check us out, go to www.rove.com. Thank you.
My name is Sam Rubin. I'm Chief Sustainability Officer. I'm one of the co-founders here at Mighty Buildings. It's truly an honor and a privilege to be joining you today at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation's Fast Forward 2020 Summit. I'm really excited to be here among such illustrious fellow speakers. I hope it's been a great day for you so far, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you a bit about what we're doing. So who is Mighty? We're a construction technology company based in Oakland, California, that's focused on creating beautiful, affordable, and sustainable buildings using 3D printing and robotic automation. We have developed a unique UV curable thermoset composite that not only unlocks productivity in the construction industry in order to build more using our existing labor force, but also opens up new possibilities in design and what housing can look like. Originally founded in August 2017, we recently launched out of stealth mode this past month. We're backed by prominent VCs such as Coastal Ventures and Y Combinator, and are currently operating out of a 79,000 square foot production facility that actually used to be a coffee warehouse, and really speaks to the versatility of our production system as far as its deployment. So far, we've begun delivering units to Oakland, San Diego, San Ramon, and we've been focusing on what are called accessory dwelling units, which are backyard granny flats, in-law apartments, and something that here in California, the state's really embraced as a solution for increasing density without changing the characteristics of neighborhoods. And so far, we have those 3 units, 2 of which you can see on the left here, as well as a new product, the Mighty House, which is a panel based on our panelized Mighty Kit system that we'll begin deploying next year, which opens up additional backyards and also allows us to move into customizable floor plans for developers and builders who want to leverage our technology. Now, I told you a little bit about us, but as they say, if the picture says 1,000 words, a video would say 1,000,000. So I'm going to show you a short video here, which kind of highlights who we are, what we're doing, and how we're hoping to unlock the productivity needed to address the affordability crisis.
As building costs continue to rise, the dream of owning a home is out of reach for most people. By 2025, 1 in 3 urban dwellers will struggle to have their housing needs met by the construction industry. Companies big and small are decentralizing as the new normal moves rapidly towards remote work and collaboration, requiring smaller, smart satellite workplaces. 4 visionaries from diverse backgrounds came together to completely reimagine the way we design and construct our homes and offices. Together, they wondered why the construction industry continues to build using archaic methods instead of embracing new ideas and technologies. And thus, Mighty Buildings was born. Born to rethink what is possible, to fundamentally transform the way buildings are conceived and constructed in the 21st century. By scaling up 3D printer technology, then leveraging the best in automation and robotic fabrication, while using state-of-the-art composite materials, Mighty Buildings is emerging as one of the world's most innovative modular dwelling manufacturers. Mighty Buildings produces the first 3D printed structures to be UL certified by the prestigious Underwriters Laboratories. Mighty Buildings can currently 3D print a 350 square foot accessory dwelling unit, an ADU, in 24 hours or less, using 95% fewer labor hours, with 1/10 the waste and scrap of traditional methods. Their goal is to automate 80% of prefab operations and reduce build times by up to 90%. But 3D printing is just the beginning. They are already bringing robotics to automate exterior finishes and pouring of foam insulation. Unlike concrete, the composite material they use is lighter, more energy efficient, and can be machined and finished by robotic arms. Due to the unique nature of Mighty Buildings' advanced composites, which harden almost instantaneously, as well as the latest advancements in reinforcing material with continuous glass fiber, architects, engineers, and home builders will have the freedom to create spaces with spans and configurations that would normally require large steel and concrete reinforcement. This opens up a whole new dimension of possible design options. The Mighty Building design and production process leverages industry-standard software to connect design directly to the production process for truly flexible and seamless flow of digital fabrication. Imagine architects working from home and deploying their new designs directly to highly automated factories. It's time to reimagine the way we build. It's time to put into force the convergence of 3D printing, automation, and advanced material science in a mighty new way that puts people and the planet first. It's time to make a change. It's time for Mighty Buildings.
Hope you enjoyed that brief introduction to what we're doing and how we're going about it. And one of the things that was mentioned in there was our work with the Underwriters Laboratories. I want to highlight that a little bit because it's really a unique strategy that we've taken as a startup to engage with the regulatory sector from early on, rather than just waiting till we have a finished product and then showing up one day. And this is because we work in housing. It's not software. We can't throw something out in the wild and debug it on the fly. We really have to make sure we're demonstrating and ensuring the safety of what we're doing. So we got to make sure we're dotting our I's, crossing our T's. So a big part of that has been our work with UL, which not only has over 100-year history of doing building life safety, but also has some of the world's leading experts in additive manufacturing, making them a natural partner for the work we've done. And since no one had ever evaluated a product or solution like ours for this type of use, it was really important that we work closely with them hand in hand to develop a process for the evaluation. And out of that has come a new standard, UL 3401, which provides guidance for 3D printing in construction and has been added as an adoptable appendix to the 2021 International Residential Code update. And so what this means is that once it's published, municipalities and other jurisdictions will actually be able to take this appendix and put it directly into their code, meaning that once that's done, we're actually in the building code. So along with driving innovation and unlocking new opportunities for what 3D printing in building can be, we've also been pushing the envelope on the regulatory space to make sure that there's room for that innovation to occur and that there's guidance for those officials who look forward looking and really want to use 3D printing to help solve their housing problems. We've also been working closely with the state of California through their Factory Built Housing Program, which is a state-level program that provides approval processes and inspections for units that are built off-site. So this means that instead of having to go to every local municipality that we have a customer in and getting a building permit, we actually work through the state to have it approved under the Housing and Community Development. And so we work with one code official that's certified by the state of California to do the code reviews, rather than having to work with individual code officials at the local level and provide the education, meaning that as we have new units, it's easy to get those approvals done since they already understand what we're doing and are familiar with our technology. Additionally, because what we're doing is 3D printing and you can't destroy it and take it apart and inspect inside once it's on site, we have an inspector who's also certified by the state who comes to our facility here in Oakland and inspects the units while they're being produced, further streamlining the process and taking that liability off of the local officials. We still need to get local plan approval as far as zoning checks and things like that, as well as building permits for the foundations and utility work. But overall, it greatly speeds the process up. Further, because of California's changes to state law around accessory dwelling units that have greatly streamlined that process at the state level and really requiring municipalities to approve them within 60 days or it's deemed approved, as well as other opportunities that unlock them as a solution for the housing crisis. As a part of that, we've achieved a Class A flame spread rating with UL, as well as demonstrating an R value of over 20 for a 6-inch wall, meaning it's pretty easy for us to achieve California's very stringent Title 24 standards. And that speaks to part of why we launched in California, which has one of the most difficult building codes to meet in the country, if not the world. And that's because, as JFK said, when he was calling on us to pledge ourselves to getting to the moon within a decade, we choose to do this not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And for us, it was really important that we take the hard route because that makes it easier moving forward. So by starting here in California, demonstrating compliance with a very stringent code, it's now going to be easy for us to translate what we're doing into other states and other countries as we move forward and establish printing hubs around the country and around the world to serve local markets where there's demand and help create a whole new class of jobs in those markets. So how are we actually addressing the housing crisis? So this little video you see here is a brief demonstration of our technology. And one of the cool things that you can see about it, it supports its own weight. So we don't need support structures or forms to really create complex, unique geometries. We can literally just freeze it in the air with our material. But we also get full chemical cohesion between the layers, meaning the finished product is actually a monolithic shell. And so with our product production as a service platform, we're seeking to automate up to 80% of the production process, taking the most difficult and dangerous parts of the job, such as framing, which is something like 20 or 40% to 40% of all ocean complaints in every given year, and is one of the most dangerous jobs in America after mining. And using 3D printing and robotics to handle that, to really optimize the value of the human labor. At the end of the day, our goal is to actually create more work, but make it less work per unit by increasing overall throughput and using our system to take the most difficult and dangerous parts. And with this, because we're seeing a loss of workers in the construction industry, nationwide, there's something like 400,000 open jobs right now that simply aren't being filled. We're seeing GCs who are aging and retiring, not being replaced by new workers who would rather work with new technology, become programmers, go into the design and engineering side of things, move into the commercial space where they have more of those opportunities. We want to bring that technology to bear in the residential sector to really unlock that opportunity and create new jobs and new workers. And also, this allows us to do full end-to-end digital fabrication, leveraging Industry 4.0 techniques. So what that means is we can take a design from Revit and have it stay as a digital model all the way through until it's actually produced. We have a Revit plugin that we've developed, which I'll talk about briefly in a moment. But we've also been working with some of our partners to develop simulation software that allows us to run through the build thousands of times before we ever get to that first actual prototype. And this means we can reduce new product introduction by 5 times. We can reduce waste by 10 times because we're printing exactly what we need. And when we use our robots to perform the milling and everything, we actually are able to capture that dust and reuse it as filler in new material. And so we're really creating a sustainable zero waste production system that creates an incredibly efficient unit when it's completed. And we've also developed our own custom software to take it from a 3D model into the code that drives both the 3D printers and the robotics. And in this way, we're able to address any design issues right up to the very end when we actually produce the unit, as well as using the simulation to identify quality control issues, design problems, potential bottlenecks in the printing or the production, and mitigate them before we ever get to that build. And in doing so, we're able to increase throughput by as much as 20 times, 5 to 20 times, depending on what system we're talking about, while maximizing the value of the labor and optimizing labor by 90%. So this really helps modern technology unlock the possibilities of things like building information modeling, BIM, and others to allow us to print chaseways directly where they're needed in the system and really increase the value and increase the throughput. Because here in California alone, we're seeing a housing shortage of 2.4 million units as of today. That's only going to grow over the next 10 to 20 years if we don't find a new way to build. So what you see here is a demonstration prototype that we developed of a fully printed modular shell. And with this, we've actually been able to print an entire 350 square foot module, which is one of our Mighty Studio units that we are selling direct to consumers already, in less than 24 hours. And with our technology, our printer is 11 feet by 26 feet by 13 feet, which means that we have a footprint of 450 square feet and a volume of 3,700 cubic feet. This means that over-road transport is much more of a limitation than the actual print volume that we're capable of. But it also means that we can set up an entire production system, a printer and a robotic finishing cell, in less than 10,000 square feet, meaning we can take advantage of existing warehouse space in urban, suburban, exurban areas, wherever there may be demand. And so this really creates an opportunity to leverage idle capital to maximize its value and provide even more value in terms of how we build housing for our market. So as I mentioned, the first step is the 3D printing, once we've done all the software and the modeling. Once it's printed, we use robotic arms to provide scanning of it in order to ensure quality control by matching the actual printed unit to the digital twin, as well as providing a 3D model of the object to provide the robot's understanding for doing the milling of the surfaces, as well as the automated foam pouring. We're also able, or will be able to do automated spray of coatings such as paint, primer, stucco, or different finishes to really open up that versatility of design. And one of the cool things, because we can actually mill our material, that means we can create a really nice, smooth, stone-like surface, leave the raw print, which some architects and customers really, really like, but also means we can do things like mimic brick or mimic siding. And in that way, leverage what we're doing to actually address traditional aesthetics, as well as opening up those new design possibilities. You see here are some this one right here is a demonstration we did for a feasibility project for an artist who's doing full installation size sculptures. And it really highlights the level of detail that we're able to achieve with our system. We can get to 1 to 2 millimeter granularity. And when you see something like this on a build site today, normally you're worried because that means that's waste. In our case, we can do it intentionally and to the exact tolerances required for a project. Additionally, we're moving forward with a fiber reinforced version of our material, which provides increased strength similar to steel. This is going to unlock the ability to move from these small units we're doing today into multi-story at a low-rise level, 5 to 10 stories. So this really allows us to get into the density and the verticality necessary in urban centers to really begin addressing the problem of housing affordability in terms of how many units there are in the market. I mentioned before the production process from a software perspective. So it starts with an architect or designer creating their design however they want, whether that's directly in Revit, which is industry standard, Rhino, which is also used quite a bit, or to doing it by hand and then converting it. But we've created already a Revit library of our panel system to make it really easy to create custom designs utilizing that. And in the future, we'll be able to unlock the opportunity to do freeform design, all with real-time costing and calculations. This is then automatically converted into G-code, which is the code that runs the printer and robots with our slicer software, and then it goes directly into the printer. Again, reducing the marginal cost of late-stage design changes that may be required due to regulatory compliance or other planning or other issues, and also really opening up opportunities in what design for housing can be. So thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with you. Really, really appreciate it. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the summit. And I hope you'll check us out when you're looking to do your next project. Have a wonderful day.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me to join this conversation. My name is Bishara Shukair, and I serve as the Chief Health Officer for Kaiser Permanente. Many of you might know we have been an organization that's been in existence for over 75 years now. We're the largest nonprofit integrated health system in the country, and we were founded with one simple mission. We are about improving the health and well-being of our members and improving the health and well-being of our communities. And 75 years later, we still truly believe that that is the core of who we are. And we do believe that those go hand in hand. If you think about that for a moment, there is no way we can improve the health and well-being of our communities if we don't do a really good job at improving the health and well-being of our 12.4 million members across the country. At the same time, there is no way we can optimize the health and well-being of our members if we don't do a really good job at improving the conditions for health and equity where our members live. And when we do that, when we focus on the conditions for health and equity in our communities, not only our members would benefit, but all 68 million people who live in those communities would be able to benefit. So think about that for a moment. If we truly are about lifting up the health and well-being of our members, there is no way we can expect our members to live healthy lives if they don't have a stable roof over their head. And that's where the connection between housing and health is so strong. Year after year, research projects after research projects, new data showing up every day, confirming that health and housing are so interconnected. In reality, common sense tells us that as well. So I'm a family physician by training. I had the opportunity to train in a family medicine residency program in Houston, Texas, that was embedded within a healthcare for the homeless program. I had the opportunity to practice and lead healthcare for the homeless programs in Rockford and Chicago. And what I've learned from my patients every day was that it's really hard for people to live healthy lives if they're living on the streets, if they don't know where their next meal is coming from, if they don't know where they're going to be able to sleep tonight. That's why I was so thrilled when I joined Kaiser Permanente as an organization. We committed to lifting up that connection between housing and health. We know that people experiencing homelessness live on average 27 years less than those who are housed. Think about that for a moment. 27 years less than those who are housed. We also know that if you're homeless and you get admitted to the hospital, chances are you're going to stay 2 to 3 days longer in the hospital because you're homeless. We also know that when you're discharged from the hospital, you're 50% more likely to be readmitted to the hospital if you're homeless compared to those who are housed. And we know that the total cost of care for people who are experiencing homelessness is 2 to 3 times and sometimes more compared to those who are housed. So again, we know that interconnectedness between housing and health is so critical. So a couple of years ago, as an organization, we've committed $200 million to do impact investments in our communities to be able to preserve and expand affordable housing in our communities. And we were so thrilled when we've made this announcement. We've partnered with organizations like Enterprise and others to really figure out how can we leverage our treasury dollars so that we're investing them in projects that not only give us a financial return on investment, but they can also give us social return on investments. And over the last 2 years, including the last 6 months when we were dealing with the pandemic, we were able to close on multiple projects, over 33 projects across our footprint that preserved or added over 3,100 units of affordable housing in our communities. And we truly believe this is at the core of what a health organization could do to lift up health. Now, we also knew that the impact investment is one key strategic tool that we have in our toolbox, but we've also known that we have to be on the ground, working community by community with others who've been in the space for much longer than we've been to be able to end homelessness in our communities. And we were excited to come to the table with a lot of humility, a lot of curiosity, to work with others who've got a lot more experience than us in doing this work. So we partnered with Community Solutions on their effort called Built for Zero, and now we're in 24 communities across the country, working community by community with the right community partners to be able to identify the evidence-based practices, data-driven practices that would lead us to identify those who are dealing with chronic homelessness or veteran homelessness, and make sure that we have a system in place to be able to end the homelessness for these folks in those communities. I would encourage you, if you're not familiar with Built for Zero, to check it out. Go to communitysolutions.org and read about the Built for Zero program. We're so thrilled that 3 of our communities have made significant progress to ending either veteran homelessness or chronic homelessness in those communities. Now, we also know that you can do impact investment, you can work on the ground community by community to try to end homelessness, but we also know that policy change and advocacy are really critical for us to be able to make a difference at scale. And we know that you can make an impact at a local level, at a state level, and at a federal level. A couple of years ago, we've partnered with the De Beaumont Foundation, and we've launched an effort called City Health. This program involved the 40 largest cities in the country on very concrete policy changes that are bipartisan policy changes that we know if we focus on those, we can lift up community health. One of these policy changes is around inclusionary zoning. And now we're working with the 40 largest cities in the country, soon to be 75 cities in the country, to be able to figure out how can we advance those types of policies across our footprint. And these are policies that our mayors, our aldermen could enact at a local level. At a state level, we've partnered with many states, including in California, on multiple propositions that would expand and add and preserve affordable housing in our communities. And we also know that the federal government has a big role to play. So that's why we've partnered with mayors and CEOs for U.S. housing investment. This is a coalition of 24 bipartisan mayors across the country who came together with CEOs from their communities and developed a concrete federal agenda with concrete asks that we know the federal government can do today to be able to expand and preserve affordable housing in our communities. We're so proud to be the national partner for mayors and CEOs for U.S. housing investment, and we're really proud of the progress that this coalition has done to help us make sure that the federal government is investing the right amount of dollars in the right type of programs that we know would preserve and expand affordable housing in our communities. So we're really thrilled about our 3-pronged approach, and there are a couple of projects that I still would like to add here, just to add to the flavor of that interconnectedness between housing and health. On the ground here in California, we're really excited to partner with Governor Newsom on his Home Key project. This is an effort that's funded by the CARES Act, and it's allowing the local government to be able to purchase motels or hotel rooms that have been used to make sure that people experiencing homelessness can quarantine or isolate safely during the pandemic. And we know that these units could be turned into permanent housing, which is a key opportunity for us to be able to support people getting off the street. And what we've seen through this effort is that people are going to need not just a key to their home, they're going to need the type of wraparound services that is so critical to be able to preserve their housing once they are housed. So Kaiser Permanente was the first not-for-profit private sector organization to step up and commit $25 million to be able to provide those critical wraparound services that are needed for people to be able to stay housed once they get a key to their permanent housing. And as I wrap up, I want to bring up something that's extremely, extremely important. When we think about upstream factors that drive health, we have to be thinking about the root causes of what drives health. And when we do that, we invariably encounter problems fueled by systemic racism and inequality. So think about that for a moment. Economic inequality, racism and other forms of discrimination, societal neglect and disinvestments, those are the factor that creates the conditions that lead to poor health at the end of the day. And we see that day in and day out. And we do have a responsibility to address those head on. So I'm going to conclude by sharing one example that I find extremely important to share with this group. Last year in Oakland, in our backyard of our headquarters for Kaiser Permanente, we've identified 515 people by name who are 50 plus, who are on the street of Oakland. We got to know these 50 plus folks who have at least one chronic medical conditions, who've been on the streets, and we've partnered with an organization called Bay Area Community Services, BACS, and we said, let's challenge ourselves and see what would it take to get all of these 515 folks off the streets. And we've dedicated ourselves to be able to achieve that goal in a year. Well, guess what? In 9 months, we were able to get 515 people in Oakland who are 50 plus, who have at least one chronic medical problems, get them off the street and get them into permanent housing. And 6 months later, over 80% of these folks are still housed. But what we've learned throughout this effort are 3 numbers that I want to share with this group. We know that in Alameda County, 11% of the population is Black. We also know that 47% of the homeless population is Black. But when we looked at those who are 50 plus, who have at least one chronic medical conditions, who are out on the street, 85% of these folks were Black. So I'm going to leave you with this note here, and think about that deeply when we're thinking about equity in our communities. 11%, 47%, and 80%, 85%. Those are the numbers, to me, that are driving us all to be thinking about an equity lens when we're thinking about our housing problems in this country. So thank you for having me here, and hope you're enjoying the conference.
What first led you to Habitat, and maybe even more so, what keeps you coming back?
Well, I think the thing that led us to Habitat was just proximity, because in America it's just 9 miles from Plains is where Habitat had headquarters, and so we had a lot of Habitat volunteers and executives to come over to my Sunday school classes at Maranatha Baptist Church, and I got to know them and admired them, and I learned slowly and surely what they wanted to do and what they were actually doing. And I saw then that the best way for me to try to put my religious faith into practical benefit to others was through Habitat. We all are taught with a common commitment that we should treat everybody equally and try to help the poor people who are in need to have a better way to life. And the best way for a poor person to have a better way of life is to get out of a substandard housing and to be able to live and to raise a family within a decent home. And that's what Habitat has done very, very successfully. I think if I had to just say one thing out of many, it would be the emotion that we feel at the end of every Habitat project when we see a family who has lived in a destitute housing project and paid high rent and been ashamed of, children have been ashamed to come home and bring friends and see them have a decent and attractive home. And I think this has been the main thing that's kept us coming back. It's just a matter of seeing in a very practical way how our small effort personally and the leadership God has granted us to attract other people to join us and to see the gratification there. I've never been to a Habitat project yet where when I came home afterwards, I didn't feel that I got a lot more out of it than I put into it. And that, I think almost every Habitat volunteer that I've talked to says the same thing. If they don't agree with me, they probably don't talk to me. But yeah, I think that's the main thing.
Thank you so much for the inspiration you are to me personally, to the Habitat family, and to the world, and so desperately in need of role models. But thank you for your continued service.
Well, Jonathan, I think you're an inspiration to me too, and I might say all of the affiliates and the leaders around the world, including the United States, of course, also a great inspiration to me.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Carter.
Good afternoon. I'm Jonathan Regford, CEO of Habitat for Humanity. We are so blessed to have the faithful support of President and Mrs. Carter. Today is actually President Carter's 96th birthday, so we thought that would be an appropriate way to start. And if you look on YouTube, you can see the rest of the interview. One of the many sad aspects of COVID-19 is that this will be the first time in 36 years that we won't be building with President and Mrs. Carter. Inspiring millions, they helped build, renovate, or repair nearly 4,400 houses in 14 countries, working alongside more than 104,000 volunteers during the annual Jimmy and Rosalind Carter Work Project. One of the myths about Habitat for Humanity is that the former president is our founder. That's not actually true. He and Mrs. Carter are our most famous volunteers, and we are profoundly grateful that their participation put us on the map. But President Carter never led the ministry. Another idea we must frequently correct is that we give homes away. Habitat offers, we call a hand up, not a handout, to families who make a down payment, repay a no-profit loan, and put in sweat equity to help build their homes and the homes of others. Our model empowers people to be a part of their own housing solutions and helps them understand the many benefits of becoming homeowners. Another misconception is that we only operate in the United States, but in fact, well over 90% of the people Habitat serves live in other countries, often in very difficult conditions. For many years, especially in the US, the problem of affordable housing was rather invisible. Those who made decisions while living in comfortable homes often were unaware of the daily struggles of millions of people who can't afford a safe and decent place in which to live. But when adult children in middle-class families began to find that housing costs were beyond their reach, more people began to pay attention. And now the coronavirus has shined a bright light on the long-existent problem. COVID-19 is a public health emergency that has claimed the lives of far too many. But it's also a housing emergency, which has become more critical as so many people have lost their incomes. We were experiencing a global housing crisis long before COVID, but the lingering pandemic has exacerbated the suffering of many. Habitat has emphasized for more than 4 decades the importance of having a safe, decent, affordable place in which to live. Stable housing, as you've heard all through this session, can change the trajectory of a family's health, educational, and economic opportunities. If we want to achieve other societal goals that we deemed important, we must include housing. If we're eager to address healthcare, we can't forget about having a safe and healthy home. If we're going to improve educational opportunities, we must consider the environments in which people study and learn. And if we're going to design a recovery plan for emerging from the COVID pandemic, we need to address the housing need. In 2020, we've also been faced with another crisis in the US, and we must look at the role that housing policies have played in systemic racism. At Habitat, we're looking to our roots as an organization that was born on a multiracial farm with a vision of radical inclusivity. Our strengths more than 40 years later continue to be bringing diverse people together and strengthening and healing communities. Part of the answer to creating real community that provides opportunities for all residents is to focus on mixed income, mixed use communities where people can live closer to work, where children from low income households can have access to decent schools and jobs. One of the latest models for recovery from the COVID crisis is less than shaped. That people called it the K economy or K recovery. It emphasizes that the economy has been pretty good for half the world or half our society, for those who have assets, who can work from home, and who have knowledge-based jobs. The situation is dire for many service workers who are at risk both in terms of access to healthcare and economic vulnerability. For several years, Habitat has been pushing the market to do a better job of serving low-income populations. We started out in low-income countries around the world. We've come to realize that we're also experiencing a market failure here in the United States. Home prices in 2/3 of US cities have hit record highs. And even though interest rates are falling, house prices are rising. Nearly 18 million US households pay half or more of their income on their rent or mortgage. That means nearly 1 in 6 families must choose between having a safe place to live and having enough money for food, transportation, healthcare, or other basic needs. Many factors are at the root of housing affordability. In the housing industry in general, the cost of materials is going up and labor is in short supply. It's hard to get workers and you have to pay more for them. Fees for developers and protracted approvals make it hard for developers to get things built. The big issue, of course, is that the cost of land has accelerated far faster than incomes. Habitat has grown exponentially around the world over the last 15 years, having moved from serving 125,000 people in 2005 to helping more than 7 million people last year. But we will never be able to build enough houses to solve the problem. So what are some solutions? At Habitat, we changed our founding question from how many houses can we build to what would it take to significantly impact the housing deficit in all the communities we serve around the world. If we're to be successful, we have to change hearts and minds so that we can then change policies. That means the public, private, and social sectors must work together. The public sector creates the environment, the enabling environment for developing more affordable housing opportunities and creating the incentives. We must focus particularly on ways to support efforts for increased Black home ownership. This is going to mean developing policies to increase land access for housing that's affordable, increasing subsidies for lower income families, and changing zoning policies. We also need to look across the housing value chain in the private sector to eliminate barriers that prevent people from accessing adequate and affordable housing. Through our Terwilliger Center for Innovation and Shelter, Habitat is investing in and helping entrepreneurs bring to market better building products and solutions for low-income families. In addition, many low-income families have no access to financing. So Habitat sought to influence the market to create micro-lending opportunities. Many families around the world can't afford to build an entire new home and finance it, but they can make incremental improvements like adding a floor, another room, getting water, getting legal title to their home, incrementally with very small loans. Ultimately, we launched our own microfinance fund called Microbuild. And through that fund and others, we're seeking to create opportunities for very low-income families to access credit for upgrading their housing. Finally, the role of the social sector is to protect the most vulnerable, to create a passion for change, and to bring the voice of the community to the table. That's why I'm with you today. Again, it's going to take people of goodwill in all arenas to change policies and to change markets so that more people can have a thriving and inviting place to live. I've talked about a lot of numbers. I think it's so important to remember that every one of those numbers represents a family and a story. I put a book out last year called Our Better Angels, and probably my favorite story from the book is my friend Boris. Boris grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a neighborhood called The Hole, and you can imagine what that was like. Gunshots, high violence. They had no indoor plumbing, and Boris and his family was struggling. He was flunking first grade. He was one of those children that could have been written off. And he told me things changed so dramatically when he was in third grade. His mom qualified to buy a Habitat for Humanity home in Optimist Park. And I love that imagery of moving from The Hole to Optimist Park. And it turns out Boris was actually a very good student. He just never had the stability and a place to study and the support. So with good mentoring and support, he ends up doing incredibly well in school, earns a scholarship to Davidson College, gets his MBA, and to fast forward, spends his career first in banking and then in affordable housing and helping low-income seniors. Boris is one of those people that when you meet him, makes the world so much better, and is, as far as I know, the first person who grew up in a Habitat house to serve on Habitat for Humanity's International Board of Directors. And I share that to celebrate Boris, but the bigger point is think of all the other children out there who just with the right opportunity could grow into all that God intended for them, and contribute bring their gifts and bring their skills to the world if we give them that chance. And so there will always be crises that bring us together and crises that divide us. With concern for everyone, as we look to the long-term necessities of responding to the COVID crisis and create ways to create a more just society, we must make a commitment to come together to create housing opportunities that will help build strong families and strong communities that include all of us. I'm now delighted that we are joined by Eileen Fitzgerald, who is the head of Housing Affordability Philanthropy at the Wells Fargo Foundation. Eileen has more than 25 years of experience in housing and community development, including service as president and CEO of Stewards of Affordable Housing for the Future, and also CEO of NeighborWorks America. Wells Fargo is one of the largest mortgage lenders in the United States and plays a leading role in creating housing solutions that are affordable. Eileen, welcome, and thanks for being with us today.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's start the conversation with a very basic question. I spoke about why Habitat for Humanity believes housing is so vital. Why has this been such a central area and area of focus for Wells Fargo?
Well, sure. So, understanding the importance of home to financial security, health, wellness, economic opportunity. Last year, Wells Fargo announced a $1 billion philanthropic commitment through 2025 to address the housing affordability crisis our country faces. At Wells Fargo, we know that a home, whether paying rent or a mortgage, is one of the largest financial obligations for a family and potentially one of the best opportunities to build wealth. As a financial services company, we want to support people in having manageable and sustainable rental and mortgage payments. But even more, we know that home is a sanctuary. Home should be a place where we feel safe, where we can thrive and recharge. We all know that a stable and affordable home is key to holding down a job, helping our children get a quality education, and supporting good health. Too many people in our country don't have that foundation today, and COVID-19 just exacerbated that.
Thank you. What are you seeing? And we've talked a lot about the problem, and I love the emphasis. Sometimes we think about only the physical aspect of home, but there's so many psychological aspects in that stability that comes as well. What are some of the things you're seeing that you are doing that is having the most impact to support families with limited economic resources to be able to live in healthy and sustainable homes?
Yeah, so Wells Fargo is really proud to collaborate with so many nonprofit organizations around the country, including Habitat, to make a home a reality for individuals and families with limited resources. Through both our philanthropy and our rental and homeownership lending investments, we make a tremendous impact on housing affordability in our nation. For example, in 2019 alone, Wells Fargo provided more than $6.6 billion in lending and tax credit equity to finance affordable rental housing developments across the nation. And through our efforts providing down payment assistance through Neighborhood Lift or financial support to Habitat, coupled with literally hundreds of thousands of Wells Fargo employee volunteer hours, we have helped tens of thousands of individuals and families become homeowners. During COVID-19, we've also been focused on helping people stay in their home again, knowing the importance of home in this health crisis. And whether that's through home lending's significant efforts on extending forbearance, or our philanthropic support in housing counseling, legal assistance, and rental support, all to help about 100,000 people stay in their homes.
That's fantastic. And we could have a whole conversation about that. It's, we are pushing very hard with a broad coalition that we need federal action on rental and mortgage assistance for very low income families, because we are looking at a potential cliff. And in a way, the short-term stopgap to stop evictions, we certainly support, but we're a much smaller lender than you, but have billions in mortgage receivables. And if we don't actually give support to make the payments, we're just delaying the problem and creating a crisis for an awful lot of small landlords who also have mortgages they have to pay.
Right.
So it's a big piece. It's where
Yeah.
we are.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, I've been excited to see what Habitat is doing beyond building homes and supporting some of the communities and the changing housing policies, Jonathan. It's been really great to see Habitat take such a leadership role in this way.
Thank you. We were, and I was really encouraged. In some ways, crises always do create opportunities, and we are certainly looking for what good can come out of COVID. But in some ways, some of our biggest growth and change came from responding to other disasters, usually natural disasters like Hurricane Katrina or the tsunami in Asia. But it did, in the last crisis, pushed us much harder after the 2008 housing crisis into neighborhood revitalization and doing more holistic work. And I think it's the right model. We're going to stay focused on housing, but we know all the elements of community are critical. And so if we want health, and I think sometimes the sectors are divided in ways that are unhelpful, so that health people say health will solve everything. And we heard a great example just before this of health and housing and the link together. Same for education, same for food security. We need all of them. But what we know is if you pull housing out of the equation, we won't succeed on some of those other pieces. So Habitat has tried in several hundred communities across the United States to have an approach that's focused on holistic community development and bringing partners in that can address all the different pieces while from a programmatic perspective, we stay focused on housing.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And it just, when we're looking at housing as building assets, we have to think about all the assets in that community, right? And the strength of that. So that's been, it's really great to see that a little bit of a change in focus. So we're excited by that.
Oh, thank you. The other side, I think we're aligned, and should tell our viewers, actually, Wells Fargo was the first corporation to sign up for our first ever U.S. advocacy campaign. And what we're trying to do that was distinctive with Habitat is have an umbrella of local campaigns from all over the country, where we have hundreds of local and statewide campaigns going on to bring a focus to the cost of housing and really focus on supply and how do we increase supply. Maybe I'd start there, Eileen. What do you think, what would be, if you could wave the magic wand, what would you change fastest to unleash more supply? Because we are just not building enough affordable housing.
Oh, probably, zoning and permitting. I know that so many of folks in the audience today care about housing affordability, and yet, sometimes our communities, we're afraid of change, and it's important to think about whether that zoning, that permitting, the policies we have locally are really the right way for this, the decade of the 2020s and beyond. So, and sometimes, the zoning's in place, but the permitting just takes literally years to do a housing development or even a single family development. So I think there needs to be that commitment that we're all want to make sure there's housing out there that's affordable for everybody who's working in your community, from the dry cleaner to the waitress and teacher to the bus driver and executive.
I think you made such a critical point. I do think it's going to take the social sector and community development folks with the private sector. We need the banks, and we need the builders, and we need the cities to sit down together. And I think there's something in it for everyone. If we could actually make it easier and faster to build, that would help. Because today the problem and I'm sure we have some developers on with us, is the math doesn't work. If I'm the most good-hearted developer in the world, and Habitat certainly is one of the friendliest developers you could find, if you want to build a market rate housing that's affordable for a family making 2 minimum wage incomes, you can't do it with today's land costs building. And then when you layer in the entitlements costs, I'll pick on California, the cost per unit in entitlements in coastal California costs more than it costs to build a house in a significant number of places in the United States. And then on top of that is, as you said, the time to build. So if we could make it more predictable on permitting and shorten that window, we need financing, and likely we will need subsidy. And the other part is the zoning. And that's why I think it's not just about federal action, because as we know, so much of both, and it really is tied to racial equity and equality, is the fact that where people live is really important. And so many of our cities all over the United States were zoned in ways to explicitly exclude people of color and other disadvantaged groups. And even though the laws changed, the long-term impact of that has been significant. One promising note, I'll share a quick story, is in Portland, Oregon, Habitat and a coalition came together, and the city council recently passed a dramatic overhaul of its zoning code to allow more housing density in the city's residential neighborhoods. And this is always going to be mixed, but there are a lot of myths out there. And what this does mean is we can get more units, accessory dwelling units, small duplexes and triplexes in communities where you have good access to schools, you have good access to transit and access to jobs. And if we don't open up those opportunities, all the inequality data says we will continue to see this growing divide.
Well, sure. And, Jonathan, people who are just, that can't find affordable things and keep moving from place to place. I mean, think about that if you were doing that with your child, right? And you had to move them to 3 different schools a year. I mean, it's just wrong, right? So getting that stable, affordable, healthy place to live that a child can grow up in a community makes such a difference. And we spend a lot of other money trying to correct for that when we could just do it right from the start, right?
No, so true. I think in the eviction data shows when a young child from a lower income family changes schools, they lose about a year of academic progress. So you think about now what's going on with COVID, and for those of us, I think about my nieces and nephews and my youngest daughter doing college online right now. And for those of us who have good internet connection and stable housing, it's inconvenient and not optimal, but perfectly plausible. You take those 2 pieces away and it becomes virtually impossible, I think, for so many people in our communities around the country to navigate this crisis right now and not lose huge amounts of progress in terms of, that's huge domestically. Internationally, we're looking at potentially 10 or 15 years of global development progress getting erased from the combination from the economic spill-on effects of COVID, way beyond the direct impact of COVID.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Digital access, digital divide, it is really a fundamental issue now of equity. And, somebody having a smartphone with a limited data plan doesn't cut it, right? So, and this is, again, integral to housing, just like having a healthy place to live. This is fundamental. Where do we all use it right now? It's in our homes. So we gotta figure this one out for sure.
So Eileen, I'll go into the danger zone now for our audience, because we want to include them in the solution of all of this. If you're watching, you probably care about this. One of the great problems is otherwise very friendly liberal people, when it comes to zoning and actually letting housing into their communities, suddenly they go to the barricades and it all gets tougher. One way, if we want to create mixed income, we need to keep investing in some of those historically redlined and underinvested in communities. But we also need to open up opportunities. Have you seen kind of best practice or example, and what would you say to our audience in terms of how do we navigate creating more opportunities in both sides of that equation?
Right. Well, I think, part of it's is being open to seeing change in your community, right? I mean, I live in Tacoma Park, Silver Spring, Maryland, and we have had such an increase in density, particularly in Silver Spring. And, some people are like, I really like that building I used to see for the last 20 years because that was the character. Well, that's okay. But we have a lot more people, and we need to think about how we help them be equitably housed. And some of that is affordable and some of that is market rate. So I think it's saying to ourselves, you know what, we got to accept change in our community, but also thinking creatively, like, you know, how might you use land that churches have, other institutional land that governments control, hospitals control. Again, just, you know, be willing to see some of those changes. So I think personally, you know, sharing that willingness with your elected officials and letting them know that's important, right? We can raise the money really matters too, but if we raise all the money or appropriate money and we don't fix change that opposition, nothing's going to really change.
That's great. Thank you, Eileen. Thank you for your leadership in this
Sure.
space. Thanks for being part of this. To all of you, thank you for your time. If you care about health, you've got to care about housing. If you care about racial equity, you've got to care about housing. And if you care about rebuilding the economy post-COVID, you've got to care about housing as well. So great to be with you all. Thanks.
You too.
Hi, everyone. I'm okay. Are we ready? Next slide. Let's start. Let's see if we're up and going here. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jim Garrison. I am an architect and a professor of architecture at the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York. We, over the last 25 years, we've been working on solutions that would allow people to react quickly and anticipate natural disasters. And in this moment, this has continued to evolve into the need to anticipate natural disasters and climate migration, both worldwide and within our own country. So we look for architectural solutions that allow us to respond to these things. And there's a kind of evolution that's taken place in our mind, and I guess in the minds of some of our colleagues, where we first started dealing with disaster, and that meant, in our case, in Brooklyn, flooding, and in other cases, it means obviously wildfires and earthquakes and so forth. And our students have studied these things, and we've come to understand a little bit about it. Then this idea of resilience, which our ability to withstand a disaster. And then finally, sustainability, which we talk about, but in the end, we want sustainability to be our ability to basically tamp down the recurring disasters that we experience as part of the way we occupy the world. So let's go to the next slide. I'm just going to show a series of images. One of the things that we had to react to here in Brooklyn was the occurrence of Hurricane Sandy, which did tremendous damage. That's the Brooklyn Boardwalk. Next slide, please. And one of our New York City political side, the Army Corps of Engineers, the FEMA, got together and asked us to develop a prototype that would allow very, very fast response to in a city, in an urban setting, that was safe, attractive, and so forth. Next slide, please. And so we developed model blocks. Next slide. And we made a prototype. And the prototype is made in a factory. And the idea was that if you have a disaster in one place, you can build somewhere else if you build something that's transportable. And my students at Pratt were working on this idea that we could have such things built throughout the world, stockpiled, and when a disaster hits, they come from every possible direction, and we support the community that needs them. Next. So fast assembly, let's go to the next slide. And the interiors, durable, resilient interiors, folks from the New York Times stayed in it, and one of the things we heard was maybe this is a little too nice for disaster housing, but we also found that disaster housing becomes permanent housing in most cases, so it really couldn't be too nice. Next one. This is what the building prototype looks like. And the idea was we could put them anywhere, but we discovered something in the process. You know, it's in the midst of a disaster, it's easy enough to have something prefabricated and put up or pre-constructed and ready to go. But, you know, you always have to get the infrastructure. You have to get the water and the electrical and sewers. And that's what cities require. And that is the hardest thing to find in the midst of a disaster. It takes a long time to get those things back up and running. So, you know, I think everyone had a certain dose of reality with this. Let's go to the next image. One of the things we were able to do was restore the beaches between New Year's and Memorial Day of 2012. Let's go to the next image. By using prefabrication and getting all the comfort facilities, lifeguard facilities up and running. So, you know, this idea of using offsite construction to reduce costs and allow us to respond quickly to housing needs and other needs is useful. So let's go to the next. These buildings are resilient and sustainable. They stay out of the water and they take advantage of solar power and they are naturally ventilated, which is something that all modern sustainable buildings really should do. Let's go to the next one. And we've also used this technology to develop mobile facilities for companies like Verizon that go to disaster sites and survey and track disaster response. So there's a lot of things that we can do with this, but let's keep going. Next, please. That's just an image from above. Next, please. All right. And what I really wanted to concentrate on was the idea of resilience and sustainability moving forward. We need to make buildings and cities that are capable of having the least possible impact on the planet while providing the best possible living experience at an affordable price. And the use of prefabrication techniques, whether I saw what a previous person was talking about 3D printing, or any number of techniques that we've been evolving over the years, are essential and can really reduce housing costs. But what you're seeing here is the top is Albany, New York. This is a triple net zero building. It's developed by people who come from the neighborhood it's placed in. These are grassroots developers. It's called the 76. The developer's a fellow named Corey Jones and Joaquin Hoke, and they are they want to bring something to their neighborhood which is exceptional. And it's the best way to do it because the profit motive is not what keeps these guys going. Let's go to the next. So this is a fly around of this building. This is 250 apartments. It is a modular building. It makes all of its own electricity by these rotating photovoltaics on the top. It's funded by a new program called the PACE program. That is the photovoltaics are. It filters its water, so it puts no sewage, microplastics, or pharmaceuticals into our waterways. And it has a very robust recycling program. It has integrated farm to table. It has farming. It has food coming from the countryside. It has food being grown in aquaculture and other resources on site. So the idea of being smart about how we build, combining sustainability, and giving ourselves a leg up so that we can start to build the kind of housing and the kind of cities we need. In New York, we're going to lose our waterfront. And at some point, defending it is going to be so expensive that the burden, the economic burden, is going to be crushing. So we will be moving our cities. Our cities will become more nomadic. We will have climate migration here in the States. We know we already have climate migration from New Orleans, from Houston, from California, and perhaps Oregon. So this is, we need to reimagine how we do this, and we need to do it in a way that has the best possible outcome for everyone. So that's my talk, and thank you very much for the invitation, and have a good evening, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Greg Marshall and with AARP Vermont. And across the country, there's a general consensus that the existing housing stock is not providing the diversity of the housing supply that we need, that housing remains affordable, accessible, and it's going to provide the adequate quality that Americans need. And this is particularly true for older adults. The good news is there are some solutions we can look for, but first, some facts. Older adults are lifelong residents, and almost all of them want to remain in their own homes and communities for as long as possible. More than 3 in 4 50-plus adults want to remain in their homes and communities for as long as they can. Also, our housing stock is built for a family led by an able-bodied 35-year-old, and it does not match the needs for an aging population. Less than 1% of U.S. homes have a set of features needed to support aging in the home, and only 20% of households are nuclear families anymore, and about 30% of those households have single people living in them by themselves. Yet more than 85% of housing stock are 2+ bedroom homes, and that's not going to meet the needs of how quickly we are aging. Home is also the center for healthcare these days. Older adults and family caregivers are performing increasingly complex medical care at home. 40 million family caregivers are providing care to loved ones, and they're often doing that in their homes. The home on the range is no longer a lifetime home. Rural America is getting older, and its housing has unique challenges to allow people to age in place as they want to. 3 in 4 rural adults tell us that they own their homes, but nearly 40% of them report that modifications to their homes are needed to accommodate aging needs. There are some solutions: Golden Girls, mother-in-law suites, minor home repairs, and technology and zoning. And I'll just talk about a couple of those before I close. The Golden Girl style of living is becoming real, and home sharing and co-housing is definitely on the rise. The percentage of adults indicating that they are currently sharing their home with another person has risen from 2% to 16% between 2014 and 2018. Mother-in-law suites and granny flats are all the rage locally these days. Accessory dwelling units are a rising solution. ADUs are an affordable housing option that can be adopted for people of all ages. Less than 10% of adults have accessory dwelling units as a part of their home, but 1/3 are interested in them, and almost 7 in 10 would consider building one to provide care for a loved one. Finally, technology can provide solutions as well, and yes, Alexa can help. Smart home technology has features that help residents remain in their homes as they age. This is critically important, but broadband is a critical ingredient to help people remain connected in parts of cities and rural areas that have less access and where more wealthy people have greater access to broadband. So this is an issue too. AARP is looking at the housing issues from an enterprise-wide way. We are looking at this at the federal issue, the state issue, and increasingly at the local level, where we're seeing a lot more traction and being able to get our message out to folks. I want to thank you for listening to me this afternoon, and to enjoy the rest of your day.